Ethan was crouched under a humming control panel, his hands covered in oil from fixing one of the station's coolant regulators. The metallic scent of the repair bay mixed with the faint, sweet aroma that always seemed to follow Rin, the alien scientist assigned to work with him. She was beside him, holding a scanner, her large amber eyes watching his every move with that playful curiosity she never tried to hide. "You humans work so slowly," she teased, tilting her head as if studying some unusual creature. Ethan smirked. "Maybe we just like to make sure things don't explode in our faces." Rin gave a soft laugh, her teeth glinting in the overhead light. As Ethan reached for another tool, she leaned closer, so close he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Without warning, she opened her mouth and gently pressed her sharp but delicate teeth into the side of his hand. "Ouch!" he exclaimed, pulling his hand back in surprise. It wasn't a hard bite, just enough to leave a small mark. Her lips curled into a mischievous grin, and she sat back like she'd just done something perfectly normal. Ethan stared at her for a second, unsure how to react. "What was that for?" he asked. Before she could answer, the sound of tools clattering echoed from across the bay. Two alien technicians had stopped what they were doing, their eyes wide as they stared at the pair. One of them muttered something in their native language and quickly walked away. The other gave Ethan a look that was hard to read, half shock, half, was it pity? Before turning back to his work. Ethan blinked. Okay, that was weird. Rin seemed oblivious to the stares, or maybe she was pretending not to notice. "Just a little human testing," she said casually, picking up her scanner again. But Ethan could feel the tension in the air now. The workers who had been talking and moving around moments ago were suddenly quieter, their eyes flicking toward him every so often. It was like the entire bay had shifted focus onto that one moment. When they finished the repairs, Ethan grabbed his tools and headed for the exit. As they walked through the station's main corridor, he noticed more aliens watching them. Some stepped aside to give him space. Others whispered to each other, their gazes lingering a little too long. By the time they reached the cafeteria, he was starting to feel like he had a target painted on his back. Normally, no one cared where he sat. Today, the alien chef greeted him with an almost ceremonial nod and served him the best-looking meal he'd ever seen on the station. Thick cuts of meat, steaming vegetables, and a sweet drink reserved for ranking officers. I think you've got me mixed up with someone important," Ethan said. But the chef simply replied, "For the one she has chosen," before turning away. Ethan froze. Chosen? He glanced at Rin, but she was already walking toward a table on the other side of the room, not sitting with him like usual. Still, her eyes found his across the space, and when their gazes met, she quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing a deeper violet. The rest of his meal was a blur. He could feel eyes on him the whole time. Conversations paused when he looked around. Even people he'd never met before seemed to know something about him that he didn't. After eating, he decided to head back to his quarters, but when he reached his door, two heavily armed guards were standing there. They didn't say a word, just stepped aside to let him pass. Inside, Ethan leaned against the wall, his mind spinning. Why had she bitten him? Why was everyone acting like it meant something? And most of all, what did chosen mean in this place? Outside his door, the faint sound of alien voices drifted through the metal. He didn't understand their language, but a few words stood out. Blood claim, life bond, and Rin's name. Ethan sat down heavily on his bed, staring at the bite mark still faintly visible on his hand. It had been playful, quick, and harmless. Or at least, that's what he thought. But now with the way everyone was looking at him, he wasn't so sure. Something had changed the moment her teeth touched his skin. And whatever it was, the entire station seemed to know, except him. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about what happened earlier. That small, playful bite from Rin had been nothing to him, just a strange, friendly act. But the way everyone had reacted made his stomach twist. He had seen their eyes, some filled with shock, others with something else. Was it respect? Fear? He wasn't sure. When he went to the cafeteria that evening, things felt different. Usually, aliens barely noticed him. Now, the moment he walked in, a group of tall, blue-skinned soldiers stopped talking and turned their heads to watch him. One even gave him a slow, formal bow. Ethan froze mid-step, unsure how to react. He awkwardly nodded back and walked to the food counter. The alien chef, who had never smiled at him before, handed him a tray piled high with the best cuts of meat, extra portions, and a sweet drink usually reserved for ranking officers. Ethan tried to ask, is this a mistake? But the chef just smiled and said in a low voice, "For the one she has chosen." Ethan blinked. What? Chosen? Who? But the chef had already turned away, pretending to be busy. When Ethan sat down, Rin wasn't there. Normally she'd join him, chatting about strange alien science things or teasing him about how slow humans worked. Tonight, she was across the room, sitting stiffly with her own team. But every few seconds, her eyes flicked toward him, and whenever they met, she quickly looked away, her cheeks, well, whatever passed for cheeks on her species, turning a darker shade of violet. Kara, his half-human, half-alien translator friend, finally walked over and sat beside him. She stared at his tray of special food, then at his face. "You have no idea what you've done, do you?" she asked, her voice low. "What I've done? I fixed a coolant pump and got a free dinner," Ethan replied, trying to joke, but Kara didn't smile. She leaned closer. "You need to be careful. That little incident earlier? It's not nothing. It means something. Something big." He frowned. "Then tell me what it means." But Kara only shook her head. "Not here. And not now. Just watch yourself." Before he could press her, she stood and walked away, glancing around the room like she was afraid someone was listening. After dinner, Ethan headed back to his quarters, still confused. The station corridors were dim, with the low hum of engines in the background. But tonight, there was something new. 2 armored alien guards were standing outside his door. They didn't speak when he approached, just stepped aside to let him pass. Thanks," Ethan said, raising an eyebrow. The guards stayed silent, their eyes following him until the door closed behind him. Inside his small room, Ethan leaned against the wall and tried to piece everything together. Why were they guarding him? Why was Rin avoiding him? And what was with all the sudden special treatment? He decided maybe he was just imagining things. Aliens were strange, their culture full of odd traditions he didn't understand. Maybe the bite was some kind of casual joke, and he was overthinking it. He sat on his bed, picked up his data tablet, and started working on repair reports. But a faint sound outside made him pause. Footsteps, slow, heavy, measured. Then voices, deep, almost growling in their alien language. He couldn't understand most of it, but a few words were clear. Blood claim, life bond, and Rin's name. Ethan's heart thudded. Life bond? That sounded a lot less like a joke and a lot more like something permanent. He crept to the door and pressed his ear to it, but the voices faded as the guards moved away. The next morning, things got even stranger. During a meeting in the research bay, Rin sat next to him. Not just next to him, close, so close their arms touched. She didn't say much, just kept glancing at him from the corner of her eyes. Every time he shifted in his seat, she moved with him, as if making sure they stayed in contact. At first, Ethan thought she was just being friendly again. But when he reached for a piece of paper across the table, his hand brushed hers. Before he could pull back, she took his hand in hers and held it. Her skin was warm and smooth, her grip firm but gentle. Across the table, 2 alien scientists stopped talking mid-sentence. One's eyes widened, the other's mouth fell open slightly. Even the chief engineer, an older alien who never paid attention to anything but machines, stared at them for a moment before quickly looking away. Ethan tried to pull his hand back, but Rin didn't let go immediately. Instead, she squeezed his fingers softly before finally releasing him. She didn't look embarrassed this time. She looked satisfied. He wanted to ask her what the hell that was about, but the meeting started, and he was forced to focus on technical reports. Still, his mind wasn't on the data. It was on the way everyone in the room had reacted, the way Rin kept stealing tiny glances at him, and those strange words he'd overheard last night. When the meeting ended, Rin stood up first and left without waiting for him. As Ethan gathered his things, Kara appeared again, looking uneasy. "Ethan," she said quietly, "you need to be ready. Things are about to change for you, and not in a small way." He stepped closer to her. "What is going on? I'm done guessing. Tell me." Kara hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the others leaving the room. Then she shook her head. "Not here. Not with all these ears around." Ethan's frustration grew. He hated being the last to know something, especially when everyone else seemed to understand it. He walked out of the room, feeling the weight of every set of alien eyes that followed him down the corridor. By the time he reached his quarters again, the two guards were still there, standing like statues. He passed them without a word, but inside, his thoughts were racing. Whatever that bite meant, it was no small thing. And if the whispers he overheard were right, then he might already be caught in something he couldn't walk away from, even if he wanted to. Ethan woke up earlier than usual, his mind still full of questions. The strange looks, the extra food, the guards outside his door, it was all swirling around in his head. He couldn't shake the memory of those two words he had overheard, blood claim and life bond. They didn't sound like jokes. They sounded like something serious, something binding. He decided he needed answers, and if no one would tell him directly, he'd have to find them himself. That morning, he headed to the engineering bay where most of the station's work crews gathered before starting their shifts. He hoped to hear more alien conversations when they thought he wasn't paying attention. He kept his head down, pretending to check a diagnostic panel, while nearby two alien soldiers spoke in low voices. He didn't understand every word, but he caught enough to know they were talking about Rin and him. One of them said something about the mark being accepted and tribal law. The other muttered something that sounded like human not knowing his fate. Ethan's stomach tightened. When he looked up, the soldiers were watching him. Their eyes had no anger in them, just something else, something heavier. Respect? Pity? He wasn't sure which made him more uneasy. Later, during a team briefing in the research lab, Rin came in and, like yesterday, sat very close to him. Too close. He could feel the warmth of her shoulder brushing his. Every time he shifted in his chair, she shifted too, making sure the contact stayed. It was subtle but deliberate, and Ethan was starting to feel like it wasn't just casual behavior. While the chief scientist discussed test results, Ethan leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "You okay? You've been acting different since yesterday." Rin didn't look at him. Instead, she kept her eyes on the display screen and said softly, "Different? No. Just where I should be." That answer didn't make sense to him, but before he could ask anything else, she reached for the stylus on the table. Her hand brushed his again, but this time she didn't just touch him. She laced her fingers through his and held them there. The entire room seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. Conversation slowed, and Ethan caught a few glances from across the table. One alien's eyes widened, and another leaned slightly to whisper something to a colleague. Even the chief scientist's expression changed, but he quickly turned back to his notes as if nothing had happened. Ethan felt a mix of confusion and heat in his face. Rin's grip was gentle, but it was firm enough that he had to make a real effort to pull away. When he finally did, she didn't seem offended. In fact, she smiled faintly, like she had expected him to do that. After the meeting, Rin stood up first and walked out without a word. But as she passed him, she let her hand brush against his arm in a slow, lingering motion. It wasn't flirtation exactly. It felt more like a quiet declaration, though he still didn't understand what she was declaring. As he was gathering his data pads, Ethan caught a snippet of conversation between two alien technicians behind him. One said something about the binding already begun, and the other mentioned protection until the union is complete. Ethan froze, pretending to organize his things while his ears strained to hear more. But they noticed him looking and immediately changed the subject. Kara appeared again, just as she had the day before. She stepped close, her voice low but urgent. "You're in deeper than you think." Ethan's frustration boiled over. "No, you're going to tell me right now. I'm tired of riddles. Everyone's acting like I've just signed a contract with my own blood. What's going on?" Kara glanced toward the door Rin had just walked through. "This isn't a conversation you want to have in public," she whispered. "Too many ears, too many eyes." He grabbed her arm before she could leave. "Kara, I need to know. She bit me. It was playful. That's it, right?" Kara's expression shifted, pity mixed with a little fear. "Ethan, in her culture, a bite isn't playful. Not like that." Before she could say more, a loud alert rang through the lab, calling all personnel to a systems check. Kara slipped from his grip and hurried away, leaving Ethan standing there with even more questions than before. Back in his quarters that evening, the guards were still there, unmoving as ever. Inside, Ethan paced. He could feel the weight of something building, like a storm he didn't see but knew was coming. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Rin's faint smile, the way she held his hand in front of everyone, the whispered words he didn't fully understand. He decided to take a walk, hoping the movement would help him think. The corridors were quieter at this hour, but not empty. As he passed a junction, he saw Rin ahead, talking to two elder aliens in ceremonial robes. When she spotted him, her face lit up in a way that made his chest tighten, like she was pleased to see him, but also proud. She said something to the elders, and they both turned to look at him. The elders bowed their heads slightly. Ethan awkwardly raised his hand in greeting, but their gazes felt heavy, like they were measuring him, approving him. Rin stepped closer, and for a moment it seemed she was about to speak. Instead, she gave him a small, almost shy smile, then walked away with the elders, leaving him standing there with that same gnawing feeling in his chest. Back in his room, Ethan sat on his bed, rubbing his temples. He wasn't an expert in alien customs, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever had happened when Rin bit him wasn't just a random act. It was something that had set off a chain of events he couldn't stop. And the strangest part was, somewhere deep inside, he was starting to feel like maybe he didn't want to stop it. Kara stood in the doorway of Ethan's quarters, her arms folded and her face tight. She didn't wait for him to invite her in. She just stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and turned the lock. Ethan sat up straight on his bed, sensing that whatever she was about to say was something she hadn't wanted to risk out in the open. "You want the truth?" she said quietly. "Fine, but you're not going to like it." Ethan leaned forward. "I've been walking around here for 2 days, feeling like the last person in the galaxy to know what's going on. Just say it." Kara took a deep breath, then looked him directly in the eyes. "That bite from Rin? In her culture, it's called a claim mark. It's not a joke. It's not teasing. It means she's chosen you as her life-bonded mate." Ethan blinked, thinking he must have misheard. "Life-bonded what now?" "Mate," Kara repeated firmly. "Husband, partner, whatever word you want. When a female of her species marks someone with that bite, it's a public declaration. It says she's chosen you above all others. And once it's done, it's binding. Culturally, legally, spiritually." Ethan stared at her. "You're telling me that one little bite means I'm married?" Kara's voice dropped lower. "Yes, and breaking the bond isn't just considered rude, it's a serious offense. It can start a blood feud. Her people see a rejection as an attack on her honor, which means if you refuse her, they'll defend her with violence." He ran a hand through his hair. "This is insane. I didn't agree to this. I didn't even know this was a thing." Kara's expression softened slightly, but her voice stayed serious. "Doesn't matter. Their law doesn't care about what you know. It only cares about what happened. And what happened is that you accepted the bite. I didn't accept anything," he argued. "I just didn't push her away." "Exactly," Kara said. "That's enough. In their eyes, you accepted. And now, whether you like it or not, you're in the middle of a bond that her entire tribe will defend." Ethan's mind flashed back to the guards outside his door, the way the soldiers bowed to him, the special food, the elders' approving looks. It all clicked into place. They weren't just treating him differently. They were treating him like someone important, like someone untouchable. He slumped back on the bed, his voice quiet. "So what happens now?" Kara hesitated, glancing at the door as if someone might be listening. "Now, there's a process, a bond ceremony. It's intimate. Once it's completed, the two of you are officially and permanently joined." He gave her a sharp look. "Permanently?" "Yes," she said. "It's for life. And in their culture, life bonds aren't just emotional, they're political. It means you'll be tied to her family, her tribe, her obligations. And given who Rin is, that's not small." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean, given who Rin is?" Kara shifted uncomfortably. "She's not just a scientist. She's the daughter of one of the most powerful leaders in the Orion clans. That makes you, by extension, someone of political value, which is probably why some people are watching you with respect and others with hatred." Ethan's stomach twisted. "You're saying there are people who would want to hurt me for this?" Kara nodded. "Yes. Rin had other suitors. Some of them were warriors. They thought they'd be the ones she'd choose. You think they're happy a human walked in and accidentally took that spot?" The words sank in, like cold metal. Ethan could picture the tall, broad-shouldered aliens glaring at him in the hallways, the sharp glint in their eyes. He had thought it was just curiosity. Now he realized it might be something far more dangerous. Kara stepped closer, her tone urgent. You need to be careful. The bond hasn't been sealed yet, but until it is, you're vulnerable. The only reason you're still breathing is because those guards are keeping watch. But if one of her rivals finds a chance to remove you before the ceremony, they'll take it. Ethan rubbed his temples. So I either go through with this thing or end up dead. Great choices. Kara hesitated, then added, there is one more option, but it's risky. You could try to leave the station before the ceremony. Get far enough away that her clan can't claim you. And if I do that, they'll call it dishonor. They might send people after you. It could mean war between humans and her clan. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. So basically, I'm trapped. Kara didn't deny it. You're in the middle of something bigger than you realize. And now, every move you make will be watched. There was a long silence. Ethan stared at the floor, his mind running in circles. He had come to this station to fix engines, not to get tangled in alien marriage politics. But the way Rin had looked at him, there had been something in her eyes. Not just mischief, something deeper. Finally, Kara unlocked the door. I've said all I can. Just be careful. And don't underestimate how serious this is. She slipped out, leaving Ethan alone with the weight of her words. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the station's engine seemed louder now, like the whole place was breathing around him, waiting for him to make a choice. But the truth was, he didn't have a choice, not one that wouldn't end badly. And somewhere out there, Rin was probably already preparing for a ceremony he didn't understand, in a culture that now saw him as hers. The bite had seemed so small, so harmless. Now it felt like chains made of invisible steel tightening around him. The next day began with a strange knock at Ethan's door. When he opened it, 2 guards stood there, both wearing polished armor and holding long ceremonial spears. Without saying a word, they motioned for him to follow. Ethan hesitated, but finally stepped out, walking between them as they led him down the curved corridors of the station. He noticed other aliens stepping aside as they passed, lowering their heads slightly, whispering to one another. It felt like the whole station already knew something he didn't want to admit. The guards led him into a large hall Ethan had never been inside before. The ceiling was high and arched, with banners of deep blue and gold hanging along the walls. In the center, a circle of alien leaders stood, their eyes fixed on him. At the front was Rin, dressed in a ceremonial robe Ethan had never seen her wear. The soft fabric shimmered with faint silver patterns, and a thin crown-like band rested on her head. When she saw him, her eyes lit up, not in the playful way he remembered from before, but in a proud, confident way, like she was presenting something to the world. One of the elders stepped forward and spoke in the alien tongue, his deep voice echoing in the hall. Ethan couldn't understand the words, but Kara appeared at his side and whispered the translation. They are welcoming you, as Rin's chosen. Ethan's heart sank. This is happening fast, he murmured, but Kara didn't reply. The elder continued, speaking about tradition, honor, and how the bite had marked him. When he finished, Rin walked forward and stood beside Ethan, her shoulder brushing his. The entire circle of leaders gave a low, synchronized bow toward them. Ethan felt dozens of eyes on him, some approving, some cold and unblinking. But then, from the back of the hall, a loud voice cut through the air. This bond is not earned. Ethan turned to see a tall alien male stepping forward, his skin a darker shade of blue than most, his build massive and muscular. He wore a warrior's armor, scratched and dented from battle. His eyes burned with fury as he looked at Ethan. Rin's face hardened. Jorik, she said quietly, almost like she had been expecting him. The elder holding the ceremony frowned. This is not the time. It is exactly the time, Jorik interrupted, his voice booming. You all speak of honor, but what honor is there in letting a human claim what should belong to a warrior of our own blood? The hall erupted into murmurs. Some nodded in agreement, others looked uncomfortable. Ethan stood frozen, realizing exactly what this was, one of the suitors Kara had warned him about. Jorik pointed directly at Ethan. I challenge him. By the rights of our people, I demand a trial. If he survives, then perhaps he is worthy. If not, the bond dies with him. Ethan's mouth went dry. Trial? He whispered to Kara. As in a fight? Kara's eyes were tense. Yes, and you can't refuse, or they'll call you a coward and strip you of protection. The elders spoke among themselves for a moment before nodding. One turned to Ethan. By our law, you will face the trial tomorrow. If you are victorious, the bond will be sealed, and none may challenge it again. If you lose... He didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. Rin stepped closer to Ethan, her voice low but sharp. I will not see you harmed. You can still walk away. Ethan looked at her, torn. Walking away might save him from the fight, but Kara's warnings echoed in his head. Leaving would dishonor her and put him in danger for the rest of his life. Staying meant risking everything in one fight. I'll do it, he said finally. Rin's eyes widened slightly. Not in fear, but in something else. Admiration. The ceremony ended abruptly after that, with the crowd dispersing. But as Ethan left the hall, he could feel the shift in the air. Some aliens now looked at him with open hostility. Others with curiosity, waiting to see if he could survive. That night, his quarters felt smaller than ever. He couldn't sleep, knowing that in less than a day, he would face a warrior bred for combat. He had no alien strength, no special weapons. All he had was his human mind and a stubborn refusal to quit. Kara came to see him, bringing a small box. Inside were simple gloves reinforced with metal plates. These might help, she said. Don't try to match him in strength. Outsmart him. Use the environment. Ethan nodded, gripping the gloves tightly. I'll figure something out. Hours later, he found himself alone, staring out the small viewport in his room. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, his old life still existed. A life where he fixed machines, drank cheap coffee, and never imagined being part of alien marriage politics. But tomorrow, none of that would matter. Tomorrow, he would either win and bind himself to Rin forever, or lose and never see another sunrise. And as he finally lay down, closing his eyes against the weight of it all, he could almost feel the ghost of Rin's bite on his skin, like a silent promise and a challenge all at once. The trial began in a massive arena built into the heart of the station. The air inside was thick with the sound of drums, the deep beat echoing off the metal walls. Aliens of every shape and size filled the stands, their voices blending into a low, tense hum. Ethan stood in the center of the sandy floor, wearing the reinforced gloves Kara had given him. His heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the weight of knowing every eye was on him. Across from him, Jorek entered through a large gate, his heavy armor glinting under the overhead lights. He carried no weapon. This was a hand-to-hand trial, but his size alone made him look like one. He stood a full head taller than Ethan and easily twice as wide. When he smiled, it wasn't friendly. The elder overseeing the trial stepped forward, raising his voice. By our law, strength will decide this bond. If the human wins, the claim stands. If he loses, the bond is void. He looked at Ethan. Do you understand? Ethan nodded, his mouth dry. The elder stepped back. Begin. Jorek moved first, charging forward like a bull. Ethan barely rolled out of the way in time, the ground shaking when Jorek's massive foot slammed into the sand where Ethan had been standing. The crowd roared at the near miss. Ethan knew he couldn't meet that strength head-on. He darted around, keeping his distance, looking for patterns in Jorek's movement. But Jorek was fast for his size, and within seconds he was in striking range again. A heavy fist swung toward Ethan's head, and he ducked just in time, feeling the rush of air as it passed. He countered with a quick jab to Jorek's ribs, but it was like punching a wall. Jorek laughed, a deep, mocking sound. Is that all the human can do? Ethan didn't answer. He needed to think. His strength wasn't enough, but he could use the arena itself. He noticed several uneven spots in the sand where stones jutted out, and a section of the wall behind Jorek was covered with dangling metal chains from old training equipment. The next time Jorek charged, Ethan didn't dodge completely. He let the big alien's arm graze his shoulder, then stumbled back toward the chains. Jorek followed, swinging again, but Ethan ducked under the blow and grabbed one of the chains, yanking it down hard. The metal link swung into Jorek's face, making him stumble for the first time. The crowd gasped. Ethan pressed his advantage, darting in and striking Jorek's knee with a sharp kick. Jorek grunted, but it was more annoyance than pain. He caught Ethan's arm in a grip like iron and lifted him off the ground. For a moment, it felt like the fight was over. Then Ethan remembered the gloves. He twisted his wrist just enough to slam the metal plate of the glove into the side of Jorek's hand. The impact made Jorek loosen his grip for a second, and Ethan slipped free, landing in the sand. Jorek roared in frustration and came at him even harder, his blows wild but powerful. Ethan kept moving, using his smaller size to weave between attacks, forcing Jorek to chase him. Every missed strike made the big alien angrier and sloppier. Finally, Ethan saw his chance. Jorek lunged, overextending himself, and Ethan sidestepped, hooking his foot around Jorek's ankle. The big warrior stumbled forward, and Ethan shoved him hard toward the uneven stones. Jorek's foot caught, and he crashed to one knee. Before Jorek could rise, Ethan was behind him, wrapping one of the heavy chains around his neck and pulling tight. Jorek tried to throw him off, but Ethan locked his arms and used all his weight to keep the pressure steady. The crowd erupted into shouts, some cheering for Ethan, others screaming for Jorek to break free. Jorek's struggles slowed, his massive frame shaking. Ethan released the chain just before the alien collapsed fully, letting him drop into the sand with a loud thud. The arena fell silent for a moment before the elder raised his voice. The human has prevailed. The bond stands. A roar of approval and protest mixed through the crowd. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face, trying to process the fact that he had just survived. From the stands, Rin stepped down into the arena. She approached slowly, her eyes locked on him, her expression unreadable. When she reached him, she placed her hand firmly on his chest, over his heart, and looked toward the elders. "With this," she said in a clear, strong voice, "I seal the bond." The elders nodded, and the crowd responded with a deep, resonant cheer that shook the walls. Rin's eyes softened slightly as she looked back at Ethan. "You fought for me," she said quietly, just for him to hear. Ethan managed a tired smile. "I guess I did." Guards helped Jorek to his feet, and though his eyes still burned with anger, he said nothing as he was led away. As they left the arena together, Ethan felt the shift in the way the aliens looked at him. The hostility from before was lessened, replaced by something closer to acceptance. He had proven himself, not through strength alone, but through strategy, and that seemed to matter here. Still, as they walked back to the quieter corridors of the station, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this victory had only tied him deeper into Rin's world, and that whatever came next would be even more dangerous. The celebration after the trial was unlike anything Ethan had seen before. The station's central hall was decorated with shimmering lights and long strands of glowing fabric that drifted gently in the air, moving as if they were alive. The smell of alien spices filled the space, and music played from strange instruments that produced deep, vibrating tones mixed with high, almost singing notes. Ethan stood near the entrance, still feeling the ache in his arms and shoulders from the fight. His gloves were gone. His clothes had been changed into a dark ceremonial outfit with silver markings that matched the patterns on Rin's robe. It all felt surreal. Yesterday, he had been just an engineer working in the background, and now he was the center of a ritual he barely understood. Rin moved through the crowd like someone born to command attention. Every alien she passed lowered their heads slightly in respect, and when she reached Ethan, she stopped just close enough for her presence to wrap around him like invisible warmth. She gave him a small smile, so different from her playful grins before, and then took his hand without hesitation. The hall quieted. The elders stepped forward, forming a half circle around them. One of the oldest, his skin a pale silver, spoke in a slow, deliberate voice. Though Ethan couldn't understand the language, he could feel the weight of the moment in every syllable. Kara, standing just behind him, whispered the translation. He speaks of the bond, of the trial, and of your victory. He declares that no one may challenge the claim again. From this moment, you are joined. Ethan swallowed, his pulse quickening. Joined. Permanently. Rin lifted her other hand and placed it gently on the side of his neck, her fingers resting just below his jaw. The gesture was intimate, and he felt the crowd lean in slightly, as if waiting for something. Then she bent her head and pressed her lips to the exact spot where she had bitten him days before. The room erupted in sound. Some clapped. Others made a low, thrumming call from deep in their chests. The music started again, louder now, faster. Kara murmured, "That seals it. You are hers, and she is yours." Ethan didn't know what to feel. Part of him wanted to step back and say he hadn't agreed to this. Another part, the part that remembered her standing proudly beside him in the arena, felt a strange, steady pull toward her. After the formal words ended, the crowd broke into smaller groups, talking, laughing, eating. Rin stayed close, introducing him to leaders, scientists, and even warriors who had once looked at him with suspicion. Now, some of those same warriors gripped his hand firmly and nodded in respect. But not everyone was pleased. Across the room, Ethan caught sight of Jorek leaning against a wall, his arms crossed. His expression wasn't pure hatred anymore. Something else was in his eyes. A warning, maybe, or a promise that this wasn't over. Rin noticed where Ethan was looking. She stepped slightly in front of him, her voice calm but certain. "He won't touch you now. Not without facing all of me." Ethan arched a brow. "All of you?" She smiled faintly. "You are bonded to more than just me. You are bonded to my entire clan. That means my protection. And my enemy's attention." Her words sat heavy in his mind, but before he could respond, one of the elders approached with 2 cups filled with a bright, sparkling liquid. He handed one to Ethan and one to Rin, speaking a phrase that Kara didn't bother to translate. It was clear enough from the way everyone watched. Rin lifted her cup toward Ethan, her gaze never breaking from his. He slowly raised his own, and together they drank. The liquid was sweet at first, then sharp, sending a rush of heat through him. Cheers went up again. Music swelled. The floor beneath them began to shift, panels moving aside to reveal glowing patterns that pulsed in time with the beat. Rin led him into the center, and before he knew it, they were surrounded by dancers moving in spirals, their robes and skin painted with glowing marks. Ethan wasn't much of a dancer, but Rin moved with an effortless grace, guiding him without words. For a moment, he let the tension fade, losing himself in the rhythm and the strange beauty of it all. When the dance ended, Rin leaned closer, her voice just for him. "You fought for me when you didn't have to. You could have walked away." He met her eyes. Walking away didn't feel like an option. Her lips curved into a slow smile. Good, because now walking away will never be an option again. Later, when the celebration wound down, Rin escorted him to new quarters, not the small, plain room he had before, but a larger space decorated with soft lighting and thick fabric drapes. She stood in the doorway, watching him take it in. "This is yours now," she said. "Ours." Ethan turned to her, unsure what to say. Everything had happened so quickly. Days ago, he hadn't even known her culture's customs, and now he was bound to them for life. Rin stepped closer, her expression softer now. "I know this is strange for you, but I chose you for a reason." He searched her face. "And what reason is that?" Her fingers brushed his arm, light as a whisper. "Because when you look at me, you don't see what I am. You see who I am. And I have never had that before." Ethan didn't answer right away. The truth was, he wasn't sure what he saw when he looked at her. But he knew she was right about one thing. His life was no longer his alone. When she left him for the night, the room felt both larger and smaller than before. Larger because it was filled with the weight of his new place among her people. Smaller because he knew there was no going back. Lying in the quiet, he thought about the bite, the trial, and the way she had stood beside him in front of her entire clan. He thought about the danger still lurking in the shadows, and the unspoken challenges ahead. And as sleep finally began to pull at him, one thought settled in his mind, clear and undeniable. Whatever came next, he was bound to face it with her.